So Pluto through the houses. So I'm going to roll through each one of these and go over the energies of Pluto through the houses. And so from an EA perspective, Pluto is the central theme, so to speak, or your soul's self-empowerment journey is kind of how I like to, or how I feel that this energy displays through the houses. And so Pluto in the first house, if you watched my house interpretation method videos, the first house is you. The first house is how you project to those closest to you, your physical body. It's the part of your chart that you can look at that keeps you moving forward. It's the helm of the ship, so to speak. So with Pluto here, then you embody the energy of Pluto innately, right? It's part of you. With the other thing here is that anytime you find Pluto in an angular house, it's a brand new cycle of evolution. So think of having many, many, many other lifetimes, wrapping up the experiences that your soul felt it needed from that specific orientation or that way of being. And it says, hey, I want to start over. And so with Pluto in the first house, it's literally a brand new cycle. It's like, think of the 12 houses in your astrology chart being a complete cycle of existence. And so you finished a complete cycle of existence, and now you come back to the first house, brand new, right? It's like now it's almost like being born, it's a baby. This is all new to me. So think of that energy here. If you put together transformation and brand new cycle, it's like I put here, it's like pulling the Fool card in the tarot, which is like it's a brand new cycle. And so what does that mean? Well, if you think of Pluto from an EA perspective, your soul's self-empowerment journey, well, your self-empowerment journey is just beginning, right? It's brand new. So what does that mean? Or what are some of the experiences here? It's like feeling powerful or feeling powerless is part of the journey here. But with Pluto in the first house, you're also a symbol of transformation, right? Both yourself and others, right? Because it's always an inner outer thing within us, right? And so you might call people to you that transform your reality, right? You have a certain perception of the way things should be from your imprinting in childhood, and somebody comes along, or multiple people come along throughout your life and are like, well, have you thought about it this way? Or I do things this way, and you're like, whoa, okay, wow, like I never thought of that, right? So that's part of this territory here. And then, as I always speak about Pluto, the polarity house is important. So think of this axis, Aries and Libra, and placing Pluto in it. You versus others, right? You in relationships. And so you're going to need to attract other people to help you orient yourself, right? It's a new cycle of evolution for you. And so you're going to need the mirror effect of relationships to help you navigate. And the other thing here with Pluto placements is it depends, right? It's part of it's your soul's experience, right? So using the example of Pluto retrograde, well, you've probably had some lifetimes here with Pluto, the energy of Pluto in the first house. And so you might have some experiences here. So think of consciousness level. You could experience a Pluto in the first house as being a natural psychologist, guide, expert, visionary, right? You are the symbol of transformation for others. To the other end of the spectrum, where you feel worthless, powerless, trying to figure it out, trying to keep your head above water, so to speak, and everything in between, right? Especially with Pluto in the first house, it's brand new. So if I was sitting with somebody with Pluto in the first house, be gentle with yourself, right? Depending on the experience, right? Or if a Pluto person that's highly conscious in the first house if you're embodying that energy, you're probably not coming to me, right? You're probably, I might be going to you, right? Could be the expression of this energy. And so it depends, right? But if somebody comes to me with a Pluto in the first and they're having difficulty or they're struggling, it's always like it's an experiment, right? It's pulling the Fool card in the tarot, it's figuring things out. So it's always important to have lenience with yourself and be okay and have the perspective of, yes, I do have this symbol of Pluto in the first house, so I'm going to have to step into some areas that maybe are uncomfortable or have relationship experiences which are impactful emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, like you name it, right? I'm going to need to have those experiences from a soul level to gain wisdom and gain knowledge. So that's Pluto in the first house. Pluto in the second house is stabilizing and building a strong foundation, right? So to become empowered in that area is the soul's desire with Pluto in the second house. How can I feel really confident and good within my own self? How can I contribute to society in a way that sustains my existence? Is a representation of Pluto in the second house. And so, one of the examples I gave in I think it was the part 2 video of the house method of interpretation, one of the sample charts I grabbed was Bill Gates. Well, Bill Gates has a second house Pluto. So there's a good representation or one representation of Pluto in the second house is he was you would see him from the outside and see a person who's pretty confident, who's pretty good at sustaining himself financially, right, as part of second house territory. And so that's a good example of this placement. The other energy that this placement holds, remember, Pluto is many lifetimes of experiencing this, is there could be an experience, a soul level experience of wealth or poverty, right? So the extremes again of both sides of this. And so how I've seen this manifest with a second house Pluto is maybe somebody who they from the outside people would see them and be like, wow, they got their shit together, right? They make a lot of money, they're grounded, they can actually teach other people how to ground themselves or how to realize their own potential, or maybe ways that they're not seeing themselves properly and have lack of self-esteem, right? But underlying that energetically within themselves, they feel like they don't have enough, right? Whether that's the things they surround themselves with, or they don't quite have enough confidence, even though it seems like they do from the outside, or they have a lot of resources, like financial resources, but they still have this underlying feeling like it's not enough. And that could be that they've experienced poverty in past lifetimes. So they come into this lifetime, and even though they they appear from the external that they have their shit together and they're pretty good, there's this underlying feeling of no, right? Like I don't have enough, could be part of this energy. The other part of second house energy, and I covered this a bit in the house method of interpretation, is heightened sexual energy, which means sexual energy is going to be important for you to step into your full expression, to experience your creativity, and to not, the important thing here is to not, so think of both ends of the spectrum, to not repress your sexual urges. Like think of things like Taurus is the inner workings of Venus. So think of, this was taught in EA, was the need to masturbate even when partnered, right? So being able to feel into and be okay with and be okay articulating this to people around you that you need to do this, right, can be part of this energy. The other part of it is you may have the ability innately to be able to unlock sexual repression in others, right? So people may come to you that are repressed, and they come to you because they see you as a symbol of transformation, right? Pluto in the second house. And so what does this mean for you? It just means awareness, right? Okay, I have this symbol in my chart, so be aware that people may come to you for this healing, right? So maybe you engage in a romantic relationship with somebody and you find out through the relationship that they don't feel comfortable with their own sexuality, or they were conditioned in childhood to repress their sexuality. So, yeah, so part of them coming to you, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, is for you to help them, right? So that could be part of this energy too. And kind of dovetailing into the financial piece of it, like this can be a symbol of having stability and having yourself surrounded with things that make you feel good, and then having that removed at some point in your lifetime so that you can become empowered. And so I didn't really state that appropriately. It kind of dovetails into the Scorpio end of the spectrum. Think of being in a relationship and blending your finances, but you being in a position of, I am relying on this person financially, right? Like maybe they're the breadwinner and they manage the finances. And then that shifts in some form or fashion, right? Whether the person passes away or there's some kind of shift in energy where the relationship breaks apart. And so now you're left to your own devices and you're like, oh shit, I don't know how to do this, right? So part of it is, yeah, your soul wants to experience how to become empowered, right? Which the only way you can do that if you are relying on someone else is to have that taken away so that you can become self-reliant, develop or cultivate your own self-esteem, your own abilities to be able to support yourself. So the other end, the polarity is Scorpio, embracing Scorpio energy, which is going deep, right? It's the other end of this spectrum, being able to blend and merge energies with other people while not losing yourself, right? So that's the other end of this spectrum. So can you embrace collaborating, merging, going deep, understanding the deeper meaning of things so that you can become balanced, right? The polarity of Scorpio. So the evolutionary or the higher expression of this energy is being very grounded in who you are, and then being able to take that out and be able to merge that in society with others without losing yourself. Third house Pluto is all about communication, knowledge, exploration, and intuition. So the third house is the communication house, exploring, learning, figuring things out. So you take the symbol of transformation and you throw it into the third house. And so, again, experiencing the extremes is Pluto and becoming empowered. So this could be just a natural teacher that comes into this reality and they can communicate and help transform other people, can be an expression of Pluto in the third house. A third house Pluto individual has been, especially if you have Pluto retrograde in the third house, has been gathering information. That's been a big focal point for your soul in past lifetimes. And so having a Pluto in the third house, especially if it's retrograde, could mean you've taken on a lot of information that you carry within your soul. And so, information that you won't need in this lifetime is just going to be, you'll experience it as not being able to grasp things, but that's actually a signal for you that you don't need it in this lifetime. So, can you be okay with, I always use this traditional school setting as being a challenge potentially for a Pluto retrograde third house signature in your chart, or even a Mercury retrograde in your chart, it can be difficult because a lot of the stuff taught in a traditional school setting you don't use in society. So it would be really difficult for somebody with this symbol to be able to grasp that kind of stuff. So that could be something that's experienced here. The other thing here with this placement is it's like a cycle of experience, meaning that because your soul is used to gathering information, you're going to orient towards that mode of expression and you're going to continue exploring, having communications, maybe putting yourself in a lot of different training programs could be an expression of this. And at certain points in your existence in this lifetime, you'll need to disconnect and be like, okay, out of all of this information that I gathered, what do I need? What resonates with me? What can I keep and what do I need to get rid of? Right. And so that's a part of this energy as well, or it could be, right? The other thing here with a third house Pluto is you could have a highly charged nervous system in your hands. So think of like energy healing, Reiki, or massage therapy can be something that may come natural to you with this placement. And then the polarity house is Sagittarius. So the intuition, right? So the third house is all about the logical mind and figuring things out and being really good at explaining concepts and being able to take the Sagittarius stuff and be able to explain it. But with the third house Pluto, it's embracing Sagittarius. So it's allowing or bringing on board your intuition, your knowing self that's beyond the five senses. So this person, their energy feels off and I feel it. I don't quite know why. I can't explain it, but I'm going to have to remove myself, right? Or I feel that I need to take this step or I need to engage in this thing. I'm not sure why, but it excites me. And so that feeling within me tells me I need to do it. Right. And so getting in touch with the intuitive part of your being, your multidimensionality, your multidimensional self, your higher self, the energies that are around you and supporting you. And so that's a part of this energy is how do I, or part of the experience is blending the two of these. So Pluto in the fourth house. So I've got nurturing, protection, and emotional mastery. And so Pluto being in the fourth house, it's a angular house, so it's a brand new cycle of your evolution here. And so think of the higher expression here of being a Pluto fourth house soul is somebody that has emotional mastery. They know how to express their emotions, they know how to care for their emotions, they know how to take care of themselves. And so they can be a healer for somebody that has had emotional issues or just a symbol of somebody that they're caring, they're nurturing, they're able to bring people in, they're able to see what people need emotionally or be able to help people understand what they're projecting emotionally, right? So that could be think of some of those things as the highest expression of this symbol. But with this being an angular house and a new cycle of evolution, chances are the need to experience the lack of having your emotional needs met in childhood. So that can be being in a foster home or just having parents that were focused on raising the family, but weren't really dialed into catering to the emotional needs of the child, or absent parents can be a part of this, right? Or it could be just not feeling like you can voice your emotions, right? Because maybe you tried and it didn't work out so well, right? So that's really could be the area that's experienced here with Pluto in the fourth house. So some of the things aside from that, like a need to be needed environment is could be seen here, which is a relationship that gets projected from one of the parents, where one or both of the parents, right, where they're caring for you, but they're doing things for you expecting something in return. So, like the classic phrase that I like to use here is, but after all I've done for you, right? Which is, I'm doing these things for you, but I'm expecting you to do something in return. And usually it's just to stay here so that I can continue to help me, which just simply means that the parent is not stable and secure within themselves. So they're deriving their sense of worth through other people needing them, right? So that could be some of the dynamic that goes on here with a fourth house Pluto. And so the evolutionary intent here is to uncover and realize, well, first it's to potentially experience some of these things, right? And then the next part is to, through life experience, be able to understand what emotional needs were not met in childhood. How can you meet them for yourself, and to do any healing that needs to be done in that area so that you can build a firm foundation, because the fourth house is the foundation of your chart, right? So this is going to be important part of your evolution. The other thing here is like soul memories of times with your parents, right? So there could be complex dynamics that maybe are not quite consciously brought to the surface, but you just feel them like underneath the surface, where maybe it's just difficult to connect with your parents or parent or caregivers, right? Or there's an interesting dynamic going on where you feel this push pull going on. That could be part of this territory too. And so just to be aware, if you have a fourth house Pluto, that's some of the things you can be experiencing, is like another go around with your parents or caregivers, where depending on the dynamics that took place in a past life, it could be a little bit difficult to navigate. But really underlying that is to be able to know and state what your emotional needs are and be able to meet them for yourself. The other thing here with the 10th and the fourth house axis, so either Pluto in the fourth or the 10th house, is gender assignment. And so if you watched my video on the house interpretation, I think it was part one, where I talked about the 10th and the fourth house and being the yin and the yang, and the feminine and the masculine within us, right? Not gender specific, but just the masculine and feminine. This could be where, how was that responded to, the masculine and feminine within you, within your childhood, right? Because this indicator from an EA standpoint means gender switch. So think of having other lifetimes where you were a female and you finished up your evolution as a female, and now you embody as a male, right? That can be part of this territory. Or this could simply be the indicator of a switch between the two, right? So think of transgender being a part of this placement. So that could be part of this deal too, is I need to potentially, coming in this lifetime, wrap up things that I need to wrap up in my feminine expression so that I can step into the masculine, or vice versa, right? So that can be part of this territory. And I'll add the caveat here too, this Capricorn Cancer axis. Like if you see a north node in Capricorn, south node in Cancer, or south node in Capricorn, north node in Cancer, and you see a square to Venus, that could be a symbol that shows maybe a gender switch in this time space reality, where you have this calling to switch genders. Like Bruce Jenner comes to mind, right? Like that's part of, if you look at Capricorn and Cancer, especially when it comes to the nodes or to Pluto, that can be part of this territory, is reorienting, right? Is being able to step into or fluidity between the gender roles as part of this placement. And so Capricorn being the polarity house, that means being responsible for your own emotions, right? And so I talk about sometimes with Cancer, because of the imprinting, maybe from past lives or from complex family dynamics, is Cancer can project emotional needs and not even know it, or know it but have problems articulating what they're needing from another person. So if you think about the Capricorn polarity, it's one of being able to understand your emotional needs, understanding what you feel you need in a relationship from another person, and then being able to articulate that. Because what can happen here is there's this projection of needs that goes into a relationship that's unspoken. And so the other person comes into the relationship, and maybe, of course, in the beginning, when you're in the honeymoon phase, things go well. But as you start to go down the road in the relationship, since you're projecting this emotional need that's unspoken, maybe the other person isn't taking care of that unspoken emotional need for you. And so you get triggered and you shut down, or you get angry, or you remove yourself, right? So that's some of the things that can be experienced here. And what's really going on is you're not fully in touch with what you're projecting emotionally. You're not articulating that. So the other person doesn't know, right? The other person is just doing themselves and is not aware that you're projecting emotional needs onto them, right? And so Capricorn, embracing the Capricorn part of that is understanding your childhood dynamics. Did they, what were they showing you about yourself? What emotional needs were not met by your parents? Can you identify them? Can you articulate them? Can you meet them for yourself so that you don't project them into relationships? Right. So that's a big part of this. And then the other part with Capricorn and 10th house is oftentimes leaving your mark on society is really important. And a couple things that can happen here is through your contribution to society, that may help you in some way uncover some of the stuff in childhood that maybe was unconscious, or you know, or you were not aware of. The other part of this territory is you do build a strong foundation, Cancer, fourth house energy, and you are some kind of healer or model out in society of how to be safe and secure within your own skin, and then contribute in a unique way to society, right? I think of Cancer as being an emotional healer, right? Like being able to, maybe it's being a psychologist or a somebody that can deal with others who have gone through similar things that you have, right? Like from an emotional standpoint. So maybe you are a guide or a healer in some way in that capacity, or just being a nurturing presence. Like I get the feeling of like being a nurse or a caregiver, like somebody that just knows instinctively what another person needs and they can meet it for them. They can help them, right? So that can be part of this territory. So Pluto in the fifth house, creativity, magnetism, and acclaim. So if you think of dropping Pluto into the fifth house is the Leo house. It's the sun house, is I need to shine here. And you're placing your soul. The marker in your chart is telling me that your soul wants to become empowered in this area. And so you feel people with Pluto in the fifth kind of feel like they have, just like the Pluto in Leo generation, there's a special gift, skill, or ability that's within me that I want to find the right way to be able to express that. And so, again, with Pluto, think of your soul having experiences of not being able to do that, right? So, there, if I go back to before I get into that, the two example charts that I brought up for the house method of interpretation were Cheryl Crow and Lady Gaga. They both had fifth house Pluto placements. So this placement is also indicative of your soul being comfortable with being famous in past lifetimes. And so you drop into this lifetime and you just automatically, the soul frequency vibrating within you is, I'm special and people should treat me as such, right? So a lot of times you can have a family environment, think of having a child with a fifth house Pluto placement, and they're always craving for attention. And you're wondering, well, why is that? Well, if you look at their natal chart and they have a fifth house Pluto, this could explain it, right? Is they're used to getting all the attention. So, yeah, within their soul, they might try all different ways of getting your attention with it, which at times might be frustrating, right? Like they do things to get attention. Yeah, that their soul's used to getting attention. So that totally makes sense, right? So you as a parent would be like, well, how do I, now that I know that, how do I create an environment where I'm supportive of what they want to express and them being able to do it in a way that is productive and honoring of others, right? So that would be part of this placement. So the other thing here can be, remember the extremes, is being plopped into an environment as a fifth house Pluto person where you are overpowered by other Pluto type people, or not Pluto type people, but sun type people that had their own creativity and they were more focused on their own creativity and didn't really allow you to be able to express your own, right? So that could be an expression of this. And why would you agree to that environment? Is so that you can A, have the experience, and then B, through your lifetime, be able to find the right ways and the right people to surround yourself with that are honoring of what you are meant to share, right? So that's part of it. Um, Ego alignment's always part of the Leo archetype or the fifth house archetype, which is like, how do I bring this out in a way that is honoring of society, right? And so I talked a little bit about this in the house method of Leo, is about maybe not feeling good enough to be able to, maybe you have some kind of creative gift, skill, or ability, but you keep it to yourself, or you do it off in a corner somewhere and you don't feel powerful enough, Leo, to shine your light and be able to share that with the people close to you or others or groups or the world at large, right? So that can be part of this. The other part on the other side of this is not really being able to shine your light as you're younger. So there's an overcompensation where you start putting yourself in situations, deriving your power from being acknowledged by other people. So not really innately feeling confident and powerful within yourself, but needing to grab the energy from others to feel powerful, right? So the other end of the spectrum. So, well, why would that be the case, right? So you, through your evolution, you will get to the point where this keeps feeling not adequate, right? I keep reaching and I keep pulling people's energy. And then when I don't get what I want, then I move on and it harms the other person. And I don't like, you in your evolution, you'll get to the point where you're like, I don't like this feeling of hurting people and taking this power and putting it outside of myself. Why do I keep doing this? Right. And so then you come back to, got it, I understand. Right. And it's usually back in childhood where you felt like you have some creative gift, skill, or ability that wasn't recognized. Right. And so you're finding a way, you're trying to find a way to step into your own power. And so through these experiences of externalizing your power, you come back to, yeah, I don't like doing this. So why do I keep doing this? I want to feel powerful enough on my own. I don't want to keep externalizing this. I don't want to keep hurting people. So I will process this, understand it, heal it, so that I don't do this anymore. And I can just shine my authentic light and feel good enough knowing that I'm in alignment and this feels good for me to do it and it helps others. The other part of this is because it's Pluto and Leo, think of the higher vibrational perspective of this is being able to be an inspiration for others, right? Being like, think of Lady Gaga and think of Sheryl Crow. They have produced music and they have entertained people and have been able to help inspire others through their expression, right? So that's an expression of Pluto in the fifth house is I will be able to help heal others or inspire others through my presence. I'm like the sun, right? I'm providing energy to other people. And then the polarity, which I've kind of touched on here, is Aquarius, which is how can I do this in a way that's honoring of society or helping society? How do I spread this out to others? Since I am the sun, right? How can I be an energy source for others? And so a good example of that is the charts that I used, Lady Gaga and Sheryl Crow, right? Like they were creative, they had creative outlets and they shared that with the world, right? So that's the Aquarius polarity. So how can you balance the Leo and Aquarius archetypes? And then we arrive at Pluto in the sixth house. So this is all about purification, discernment, and service. So, sixth house, think of the higher expression of Pluto in the sixth house. A Pluto in the sixth house soul is being of service, helping, healing, purifying other people. It always starts with yourself, but helping and healing others. Somebody with a Pluto in the sixth house can already have soul imprinting of, I'm just a natural healer. I can help you heal, right? Can be the highest expression of this. Pluto in the sixth is a strong analytical mind, right? Being able to figure things out, being discerning or making adjustments within yourself, right? Like I act or behave in a certain way. And so I take the feedback from that and then I understand what that's telling me about myself and I make adjustments, right? Can be part of this energy. Since it's Pluto in the sixth house and needing to experience the extremes at a soul level, it could be giving to people, situations, working at jobs where you do it because some part of you feels good because you're being of service, but it's not really in alignment with what you want to do, or it doesn't give you energy to do it. It's more energetically draining, but a part of you feels like, well, I really have this innate drive, this soul drive to be of service. So on some level, it feels good and I'll just do it. Like I'll suck it up and just do it, right? Can be a part of this energy. Um, the other end of the spectrum could be your soul has had many experiences of subjugating yourself or giving to causes that you're really not fully aligned with, or think of like doing a job. Like I'll use the example of me. So I have a south node in the sixth house. So I'm familiar. That's another past life marker. So I'm familiar with it feels good to just be of service, right? But I'm, like my IT job progressively got to the point where I'm like, this doesn't feel good to me. There's a creative side of me that's not allowed to be expressed or it's not acknowledged in this container. So this doesn't feel good to me anymore. So I need to move on, right? And so the other side of this is just being no, like saying no to a lot of circumstances because there's restriction there. You don't want to feel restriction. So the automatic response is no, I'm not doing this. I need to have autonomy. I need to be able to do this in a way that feels good for me on a soul level. It could be a representation of this. Strong analytical mind, I put in here like focusing on the dots is part of it. So there could be potential here for, I could speak to this too, because I have a Virgo moon, which is related to the sixth house, is what I mean by focusing on the dots is overanalyzing. right? It's like getting stuck in the details. And in the IT field, I was able to do that a lot, which is like it's the gift, it's the superpower, but it's also can be overdone, meaning that I can really improve things. I can focus on them and be and look at a process and be like, these couple things need to be tweaked and then it'll be perfect, right? And that's good. That's a superpower. But the other side of that is focusing too much on the dots and not seeing the bigger picture, right? So, what's the bigger picture here? Am I getting too stuck in the weeds and I'm not seeing the bigger picture here? Can be part of that. And that definitely relates to criticism within the self, too, like refinement of the self, meaning you're too focused on the imperfections and you're not seeing the big picture. Like, there's a lot of other good stuff that you bring to the table that you're not seeing because you're focused on the stuff that you feel needs improvement, right? So that can be an expression of this energy. So realizing that, okay, I have Pluto in the sixth house, I need to back up, right? Like for me with a Virgo moon, I noticed if I feel restricted in my body and I feel tense or I get a headache, back up. I'm focusing on the dots too much, whether that's a project or helping a person or focusing on the imperfections within myself. Hey, back up, right? So I'll go for a walk in the park or I'll just sit there in silence for 5 or 10 minutes and focus on my breath, right? Is something that I would do, right? Or just do an exercise that grounds myself, right? To be like, okay, step up or step back, open your energy a bit. So that can be part of the deal here too. So the polarity is Pisces, and that's really just what I talked about, right? Being able to gather or gain a bigger perspective, being able to check in with your body. Do I feel tense here? Do I feel do I feel like this is what I'm contributing to is bringing me energy, or does it drain me energetically? And so in EA, they talk about this Virgo Pisces axis as the victim martyr axis, meaning that on one side of the spectrum, Pisces, you can feel like things are happening to you, or you're feeling the energy of people so acutely that it's overwhelming, right? So you're like, well, this stuff just keeps happening and I don't know why this is happening to me. And you get into some kind of like a victim consciousness. And then the other end of that, and on the Virgo end of it, is like, I over help, right? I just help everyone. I'm there for people. I have no concept of what my own needs are. I just totally externalize. And my whole value proposition is how am I helping others, right? Which gets tiring because it's like that's not a good use of your energy. So this polarity is getting a bigger picture on things, realizing that you're not a victim and that you do have power, and then being able to put your energy towards things to be of service that fill you up energetically, that make you feel good. This feels like a good use of my energy and not just identifying things or people that need healing and always stepping in, being able to be discerning in terms of where you put your energy and understanding that you may identify people that need help or healing or people like that may come into your life. That doesn't mean that you're supposed to heal them, right? It's like can you understand the Pisces side of this, that each person is going through their own journey and they need some life experience of their own to be able to step into their own power. And it doesn't mean that they need you to help them. There are people that do need help, and you will be a frequency match to help people, but it needs to be the right setting and needs to give you energy too, not take your energy. So that's the important thing here. Pluto in the seventh house. And so here we have the house of others, right? So relationship dynamics, objectivity, and authenticity. And so the higher or the highest, or let's just say the higher expression of Pluto in the seventh house would be somebody that is very adept at relating, being able to listen to another person's perspective, be able to not lose themselves in relationships or not feel the need to be able to overpower others in relationships, right? It's that perfect balance of being in alignment and being able to co create with other people. And so that's the highest expression here. But again, this is an angular house. So it's a new evolutionary cycle for your soul. So that means, similar to like Pluto in the fourth house, that there's probably going to be some refinement that is needed with this placement. Not always, it depends. And so the superpower here, like I said, is making or being in somebody's presence and having them feel seen and heard, right? Like being able to sit next to somebody and them being able to tell you their perspective and you understanding and be able to help them or just be somebody there to be able to listen to them. But again, because this is a new cycle, so you have power dynamics, you could have abandonment, you could have belief structures that get projected, you could have rejection, non-transparency, you name it, right? So there's all kinds of think of all kinds of dynamics that happen in relationships that can be experienced here. And the reason for that to be experienced is to be able to refine your own self expression, the opposite house, the first house, right? So I would say compassion for yourself is a big one here with Pluto in the seventh house, is to know that you're supposed to your soul is wanting to experience all different ways of engaging in relationships. And what does that mean? Right. And the only way to know is to engage in relationships and project yourself and get feedback. And so that's part of the territory here. The big one here is losing yourself in another's perspective or a need to be needed, right? Which I already kind of talked about this in the beginning, which is you connect with somebody and you think highly of them and you're actually what's happening is you're seeing maybe the aspects of them that you admire that you carry as well, but you're projecting them onto them, right? So it's like that person is amazing in this way and this way, right? And so you form a relationship with them and then you wind up losing yourself in them, meaning that you're externalizing your worth onto them, right? And so that can be part of the deal here with Pluto in the seventh. And then a need to be needed, where you feel that, or this could be conscious or unconscious, where you set up a need to be needed. So what I mean by that is that you surround yourself with people and you are helping them in some way, or you are providing for them in some way, or you just are setting up an environment where it makes the other person feel like they need you, right? And so the dynamic here is that the other person, like this could be a parent child relationship too, where the parent has this feeling of unworthiness inside of them. So they're deriving their feeling of worth from being of service or being a container or helping somebody else, right? So just using the parent child example, it's like the parent, like if you've heard the phrase of something like, but for, but look at all the things that I do for you, right? So that phrase right there is that need to be needed environment, right? Where it's like, I'm doing these things for you, but underlying that, I'm expecting you to stay here, right? Or need this help that I'm giving you. I expect that from you. So you could have a confrontation or something along those lines, and you hear the phrase, but after all I've done for you, or look at all I do for you, right? And that within the other person, like think of it from a child's perspective, is like that could be like, oh yeah, look at all of the things that you do for me, so I feel obligated to behave in a way that you expect me to, right? So that's the need to be needed environment. And and if you think about this, it's just the parent trying to show themselves that they don't feel powerful, so they're deriving their power from controlling their environment or other people. And then the other side of the coin, for the think of it from this example from the child's perspective, is will this energy will eventually shift, and the child will be like, well, no, I actually am good on my own, right? I actually can stand on my own 2 feet, and I have what I need to take care of myself, right? And that doesn't, I mean, it's just two people trying to see each other, right? The mirror effect is all that's going on here. So that can definitely be seen here, or just in the Libra archetype. If you have heavy Libra, like a Mars in Libra can be an indicator of this, which is the same thing. It's like you lose yourself. It's like, what do you need? Right? Kind of an energy. And it's like, well, it actually starts with the opposite side of Libra, which is the Aries side of Libra, which is, what do I need? What do I feel like I don't have? And can I meet that for myself? Then I'm in alignment, right? The other thing here is attracting someone who possesses the same behavior or qualities as a parent. So think of that example that I gave, and then that child going out into the world, being older now, meeting somebody, maybe getting married, and finds out that they repeat the same pattern, right? Like maybe they attract somebody and it's a need to be needed environment again, or they lose themselves, right? And so it's it's another opportunity to be able to see yourself, to be able to say, what am I projecting here, or what still needs to be processed from childhood, right? Like if you're, oftentimes we'll get into these dynamics within relationships, and even though they don't feel good for us, if something feels off, it's still familiar, right? So then you go off and maybe you have a relationship that doesn't feel good and it ends, and you're like, okay, great, that's over, right? And then you go into another relationship, and that's good in the beginning, and then as time goes on, you get closer and you move into the eighth house territory, you start seeing some things, and maybe there's an energy shift, and you're like, oh, this again. Got it. So, what am I being shown here? What is going on within me? Why do I keep attracting this? Right? Because there is a purpose in all relationships. What is being mirrored back to you? So, this is the territory of having relationships, exploring relationships. What does it mean for me to engage in relationships? And then being able to reflect and be like, okay, well, what was that showing me? Right? So, that's the territory here. And like I already covered, this as part of my talk here, is Aries energy, which is how can you understand what relationships are showing about you, and then be able to become more in alignment within your own being, what feels good for you to project yourself, maybe reflecting on childhood relationships or even just relationships in general, and being like, what are they showing me? And then being able to heal stuff if you need to heal it, or make some refinements in terms of your expression, or maybe being able to develop the ability to listen to other people's perspective can be part of this. And so being solid in your own self, projecting that out with the understanding that everybody has their own perspective and has their own experiences that they are projecting as well, and being good, right? Being able to be in alignment, being able to engage in relationships from that perspective, and then knowing that the relationships that are supportive of your unique self are going to come into your existence. They just have to, right? It's the law of attraction. So once you're solid and good in terms of who you are and you're no longer projecting any needs, you're not going to attract others that are going to project needs onto you. It's just not going to happen. Or if that's attempted, you will see it a mile away. You'll be like, "Oh, I see what's going on here," right? And it won't be a frequency match. It won't happen. Right? And this area is one of attracting many different people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, right? So that you can know who you are, right? That's the energy of this placement. And then the other thing here I listed on the bottom is encouraging independence and differentiation in others. So going back to the beginning where I was saying like the highest expression of this symbol is exactly that, right? People may come to you and you might just authentically carry the vibration of modeling this is how you engage in relationships, right? Like this is the right way. This is the right way for you to engage without losing yourself, right? So you could be a model of that for others. So Pluto in the eighth house. So Pluto is right at home in the eighth house. The eighth house is the Scorpio house, which its modern ruler is Pluto. So depth, vulnerability, and transformation, the symbol of Pluto, right? So the higher expression of Pluto in the eighth house is you are that symbol for others. People potentially come to you for healing or for, I always think of this as the psychology part of our existence, right? Like the natural psychologist can be the eighth house. Like I can just see or feel things, right? Not just the psychological mental perspective, but an energetic perspective, right? Like I can feel the energies of others and I know what they need, right? So you can just be a natural somebody that can break through the limiting beliefs of other people, somebody that can see the shadow side of other people and being like, hey, have you thought about this or what is your response to this, right? And be able to have people open up and be able to see where they may be hiding things or where they may have some emotional trauma, right? Like just being a healer can be part of this eighth house Pluto territory. And so the other marker here, again, Pluto is the extremes, right? So your soul needing to experience some of that so that it can orient itself. And so this could be past life or current life in power imbalances. So spiritual, physical, financial, sexual, emotional, betrayal, abandonment, non transparency, all of those keywords can be the experience in this life, or you may carry soul memories of these power imbalances in past lives. And so, whenever I see an eighth house Pluto soul, transparency is huge. And especially the knowledge of you having this symbol in your natal chart is huge because now you can understand yourself a little bit better, right? And this is the power of understanding your natal chart from an EA perspective is that your multi-life journey comes to light where you can see, oh wow, well, yeah, I may have experienced some of these things in past lives, which may explain some of the dynamics in my relationships in this life. Because the other thing with an eighth house Pluto is you are going to reconnect with a lot of souls that you've already had go arounds in other lifetimes. And so think of reconnecting with somebody that maybe there was some physical abuse or financial hardships or sexual abuse or emotional betrayals or non-transparency, right? So think of that coming into this life. And so this can be a symbol of the alchemist, right? Or changing karma. And so what I mean by that is you could form a relationship with somebody and things are going well, and from a logical perspective everything seems fine, but you start getting this feeling like you're unsafe or something's going to happen. So it can either be your intuition kicking in, or maybe you've had a past life with this individual and maybe that was the case, right? So being able to sit with somebody that you're in a relationship with and be like, hey, I have this symbol in my chart. And so I'm noticing for myself that I'm feeling unsafe, but there really is not a reason why. So, can we explore this? Can we talk about it? I'm not sure what's going on here. Right. And so, if the other person is aware and conscious enough, then maybe you guys engage in a conversation and you're like, and they're like, maybe they respond and they say, hey, okay, thank you for bringing this to me. Let's try to figure this out. Like, what's going on here? Let's try to understand this, right? Like, if you're both into astrology, maybe you have a relationship reading where there are some symbols in the chart which can show you, oh, yeah, you probably did have a past life relationship. And it can even highlight for you what some of those dynamics were. So you can see them in a chart and be like, oh, okay, well, there's a symbol here which shows that maybe there was some betrayal or abandonment. And so how do we not repeat that, right? Well, the first major step is the awareness piece of it, to be like, oh yeah, well, okay, now we're dealing from a past life perspective. So now that we're aware, we can change this dynamic, meaning that we don't come together and maybe you walked out on me in a past life. So now I'm going to walk out on you, right? Like karma. And so you can change that by just bringing it to your awareness, to both of your awarenesses, and be like, okay, this is a past life thing. So how do we shift this energy, right? So that we no longer need to go through this again, or I leave you or you leave me. Or maybe if we do feel that we need to separate, we are honest and we're transparent and we're like, hey, I'm feeling things are off here and maybe I need a little bit of space, right? So it's not maybe as traumatic as it was in a past life where somebody betrayed somebody, right, and took off, and it made an emotional and spiritual impact on somebody. And so you can actually shift that here in this energy. And I would say this is the case for heavy Scorpio too, like a Mars in Scorpio, or a personal planet in Scorpio, right? This could be some of the stuff that's felt here too. But certainly with a Pluto in the eighth house, this is that territory, right? And so the other thing, because there's replays from past lifetimes, you carry a frequency that's going to call these individuals to you, right? So you have this frequency of just attraction, right? Attracting people to you. And so the other part of this territory is, I call it code exchanges. You can call it just energy exchanges, which means like you've probably had go arounds with a lot of different people in other lifetimes. And so there's like a soul agreement to reconnect. And that can be in any form or fashion. That can be, I put here a certain amount of time together, a glance, a touch, a conversation, sexual acts, those type of things. Business ventures can be part of this, you name it, right? Any kind of relating in some form or fashion. And so, again, discernment, avoiding suppression, openness, and transparency is crucial, right? That's the piece here, is to A, know this symbol in your chart, and then B, know that you could be feeling things from other lifetimes, or know that you need to exchange codes with other people. And so being transparent and honest within yourself, and then being able to be comfortable to explain that and be honest with the people around you, right? That's a big part of this one. And then the polarity is Taurus, which is, this is an intense placement, or could be an intense placement, Pluto in the eighth house. So it does require, or oftentimes requires, removal of the blending of energies, right? The eighth house is all about blending energies, right? So I need to back up at some points in time so that I can reestablish my own footing, right? My own energetic expression. And so this can be on your own accord, it can be through circumstance to allow you for some time to heal potentially and then be able to reflect on, okay, what was that showing me, right? What was that all about? What can I learn from that? And then move on, right? So you're going to need some time to ground yourself, Taurus energy, be in your own skin, be in your own energy, and remove yourself at certain points in time. And so this, eighth house territory is, you'll hear Phoenix rising from the ashes, and this could be part of this territory, right? If you think about the power imbalances and maybe experiencing some of those in this lifetime, it's going to require you to back up and to heal and to understand the deeper meaning and to transcend and be a phoenix rising from the ashes. And so the soul intent is to embrace the Taurus polarity, which is like, I am aware I am a Pluto in the eighth house, transformative, natural psychologist, bullshit detector person, right? And I am solid in who I am. And so I can be open and authentic and express myself in the most authentic way for my soul and not allow the merging of energies with others to break that solid foundation, that Taurus, that knowing of yourself, the self-esteem part, the being able to support your own self part, right? The Taurus side of Venus. So that's important for this placement. So we arrive at Pluto in the ninth house. So ninth house territory is intuition, teaching, learning, travel. So the higher expression here with a Pluto in the ninth house is the soul has wisdom is like the phrase that pops into my head. And so you've explored in past lifetimes, your soul has explored many different cultures, many different ways of being, many different teachings, gaining wisdom in terms of metaphysical existences, right? So not just from the logical Gemini third house perspective, but the ninth house perspective, which is more understanding the multidimensionality of your beingness, right? And so that is ninth house territory is like, I can say, like being a natural sage or somebody that is a guide for others can be a Pluto in the ninth house. And so usually, not usually, part of the, well, I guess I can say usually, ninth house Pluto is needs independence, needs to be able to follow instincts to go, right? Whether that is traveling to other places because it's places they've been in past lives and there's some more work that needs to be done there, or there's just new places that they need to explore. They get a soul calling and they must go, right? So that's why I put in here is Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac, a favorite song, right? Because that song pops into my head when I think about this placement, which is like, you need to do you. You need to go your own way, right? And so talking about the extremes of this placement, it's one of them is over identification with a belief system, right? So maybe being born into a family that was heavily, had heavy religious conditioning, right? So then you're born into that family and your part of your container is to live according to those religious rules. And then as you get older, you're like, I lost myself in that religion and it was starting to suppress some of my natural instincts or abilities or ways that my soul wants to express itself, right? And so you come out of that and you realize, oh wow, you start to see some of the conditioned beliefs that were part of that religion, right? That don't really are not in alignment with your soul's purpose here, right? And so that can be part of it. Think of not just religion, but think of just a belief system from childhood, right? Like this is the way that we do things, or there's a certain structure that is held for you, and you agree to it and it feels good. And then you get older and you're like, oh, yeah, I need to break away, right? Or even when you're older, right? Connecting with a group or connecting with a certain teaching or teacher where you're like, wow, yeah, they have the answers, right? They know truth for everyone, right? And it's like, then you start realizing, maybe not. I understand that's their truth, but it's not my truth, right? The other big thing here is getting intuitive downloads, which is like you just know things, right? Maybe that's through meditation, or maybe it's just spontaneously through your life. You get these downloads where you're like, oh, got it. I know this now, right? Or I know this about a past situation, or I know this about a person, or I just know this about my soul or other people's souls, or what we're doing here on this planet, right? That we are multidimensional beings and we are expression of source energy, right? Like, so maybe you just start getting downloads of universal truth, right? And so that's part of this territory here. Visions of the future, that's part of it too, or maybe even remembrances of the past, right? Could be part of this. Deeply profound sleep experiences, like think of dreams where you think of astral travel and things like that, can be part of this territory. And so bringing the Gemini piece into this, Gemini is other different points of view and being exposed to them so that you can understand that everyone is an expression of source energy. Everyone has their own lived experience. Everyone has their own perception of this reality. And that's cool, right? The other part of Gemini is the helpful part of Gemini for Sagittarius is a lot of times Sagittarius will get these intuitive downloads or knowings or feelings or future visions or past life stuff. And maybe times it's hard to articulate what that is or what that's all about. Like think of astral travel and somebody experiences that for the first time and they don't even know what the hell that was, right? Like what just happened, right? So attracting or bringing Gemini into this, it's like collaborating with others that are like, oh yeah, you astral traveled. And you're like, what the hell is that? I need to know more about that, right? So the Gemini side of it is gathering information, like another person that has already had experience with that or does it often can now offer you the languaging, right? So that you can be able to explain that to others, to be like, oh yeah, I astral traveled and this was my experience, right? To be able to communicate that Gemini energy, right? So that's the blending of Sagittarius and Gemini, is this wisdom now being able to be taught or communicated to the people close to you. Or simply maybe you are a teacher, right? So you need the Gemini energy to be able to communicate it. Because it's one thing to feel it in your body and know you had a profound experience. It's another thing to be able to convey that to somebody else. So we've reached Pluto in the 10th house. So here we have inner stability and authentic expression in society. And so think of the highest expression of this, somebody with Pluto in the 10th house, as being a natural leader, somebody that can just walk into a room and everyone just feels and knows, oh, that's a leader, right? Or they carry the energetic expression of leadership is part of this, and doing it in a way that is authentic to them and contributes positively to society in some way. So that would be a Pluto in the 10th house soul. But because this is an angular house, 10th house, a new cycle of evolution, that more than likely for most people with this signature, they're going to need some direct experience on how to do that, which means because it's opposing the fourth house, usually not a, there's usually experiences in childhood which are not supportive, right? And think of emotional stuff. If you watched Pluto in the fourth house, it would be potentially similar type experiences here with Pluto in the 10th house. And so establishing a firm foundation for yourself and coming out in society. And so what's normally seen here with Pluto in the 10th house, if we think about the extremes of Pluto, right, is maybe past lifetimes or even this lifetime of being in a leadership position, which is not really authentic to who you are, right? Like being in a leadership position, but maybe it's contributing to a cause or a company or an environment that really doesn't allow your full self to shine, right? And so that could be one of the symbols here. The other could be maybe a past life indicator of, the same type of thing, contributing in a way that maybe not even in a leadership role, but contributing. Think of doing like labor type work and it's hard work and you don't really like it, but it pays the bills kind of a thing. And so maybe you've spent other lifetimes doing that and it wasn't really what your soul wanted to do. It's just, in society, you were pushed into a certain line of work because you needed to support yourself and you did it. And that was great, right? But it didn't really check all the boxes. Or the other thing here is gaining some type of social status where you are externalizing your power, meaning that you are are a leader, but in a way that's kind of like a dictator or a leader that likes having a lot of people underneath him. So he's deriving his sense of self worth from the people that are underneath him or following him or that he is instructing them to do something, right? And so he's exerting his power over others to make himself feel powerful, right? And then at some point along his evolutionary journey, her evolutionary journey, that shifts. And then they get to the point where they're like, well, why did that shift? Or it was so deeply impactful to their self worth that it caused them to reflect and be like, okay, well, what am I? Why is that? Right? What is going on here? Why did that happen? What am I trying to show myself here? And so that could be part of the deal here with a 10th house Pluto show, a 10th house Pluto symbol. The other thing that could come naturally is just understanding how social structures work can be part of this. Just knowing because you've had soul experiences of hierarchies and how societal structures work. So you can walk into some place and just innately know what's going on, like how the hierarchy works and who does what. And maybe non-authentic leadership would be easy to spot with this placement, meaning that somebody may be presenting in one way, but that's not really what's going on behind the scenes type of a deal. That can be seen here as well. And then similar to Pluto in the fourth house, this is gender roles, right? And a gender switch indicator, meaning that could be potentially a switch of genders where you were a female for many, many lifetimes and you've experienced all you could there. So now you're in the process of switching to a male or vice versa. Or this could be transgender, can be an indicator here with a 10th house Pluto. I've seen a transgender chart with a 10th house Pluto that was opposing Venus in Gemini in the fourth house. a split, right? So meaning they're experiencing both, right, as part of their incarnation here. This also can be just the masculine and feminine within you, right? And how that gets responded to in childhood and how you're able to be able to recognize it and express fully both ends of that for yourself. And this isn't gender specific. It's just everyone is carrying a masculine and a feminine presentation. And how much or how little are you carrying, right? Because if your soul is trying to reorient itself from a gender perspective, you may be in a lifetime where you carry more masculine than feminine energy, or the other end of the spectrum. Or in terms of the gender switch, it could be where I talked about this in Pluto in the fourth house, where you feel the need to switch genders in this lifetime, meaning that maybe you come in as a female, but you feel like you really need to switch to a male at some point in time. So it's almost like your soul is finishing up what it needs to in the female presentation. And then during this lifetime, it will switch that to a male or vice versa, right? Either way. So that can be an indicator here as well. And like I said, in the fourth house, Pluto, a strong indicator, and it's not always, but if you have the north and south node in Cancer and Capricorn, and it's square to Venus, that can be an indicator of a desire to switch genders in this lifetime. Doesn't mean everybody that has that signature, but if you do have Pluto in one of these houses and you have that square, or even if you don't have Pluto in the 10th and 4th, you just have the nodes in Capricorn and Cancer square Venus, that could be an indicator of it, right? So the polarity house is the fourth house, it's the Cancer house. And so what was not met emotionally in childhood, coming back home to yourself, understanding who you are, being able to acknowledge and express the masculine and feminine within you, creating a firm internal foundation, which is the fourth house, which then allows you to come out authentically in society and be able to contribute in a way that's most impactful for yourself and others. And really to reach your fullest potential, right? Because the only way you really can come out authentically in society is to have that strong foundation in place, right? And I like to say with this one, it's more, I mean, this is really for everyone to be heart centered, right? What do you desire from a heart perspective, and following that and allowing that to guide you. So that's a big part of this placement. And then we move to Pluto in the 11th house, which is innovation, objectivity, and group dynamics. So the 11th house is the Aquarius house. It is forward thinking. It is how do I, let's use the phrase, how do I leave this planet in a better place than where I found it kind of energy. It is visionary, right? That's just the word that pops into my head. And so think of the highest expression of this placement being a Pluto in the 11th house person, of not conforming and being a model of leadership in terms of how do people express themselves authentically, or how do we move the collective consciousness forward so we can make this existence better than what it is, right? And so these people can just redefine reality, right? Like they have a plan, they have a vision for how to do things that will make things better. Aquarius is also tied to innovation and technology, right? So maybe technological advances can be part of this placement. If you have a Pluto in the 11th, maybe you have a strong technological mind and you're able to figure things out and able to create things, right? Can be part of this. And so the 11th house is also tied to groups and associations. So groups that you're a part of out in society. And so the experience here can be I there's like a combo response here, and I call it the Saturn, the Uranian, or a combo response. And the reason why is because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, and its modern ruler is Uranus. And so there can be a bit of this energy that gets experienced for people that have this placement. And so one of them is I don't fit into groups. I try to fit into groups. I try to participate in groups. I feel like an outsider, right? Can be part of this energy. The other part can be the Saturn response, which is like you already have a pretty established way of living your life and you're not really willing to change it, which is kind of the opposite of being the visionary. It's more being traditional and not really being open to change, right? Like I think of my mom comes to mind, and for the longest time, she would not, she wanted nothing to do with a smartphone. She wanted nothing to do with a debit card. She wanted nothing to do with anything technology wise. She still kept a manual checkbook, like those kind of things, like just old school and not really willing to change it, right? So that can be the Saturn response to this. The Uranian response is the other side of it, the visionary, right? And somebody that's like, they participate in groups, but they're like, yeah, I don't really know, right? Like I have a different way of seeing things. And so I'm not going to be able to fit into groups, and that's okay. I'm going to be a group of one, right? Or I'm going to collaborate with one or two people that we both kind of have the same vision. And so we can work together. And I'm going to approach things from that perspective. Or the combo response, which is the one where I really don't want to be an outcast. I really want to fit in some form or fashion because that feels good. But I often have thoughts that are different than the group. Sometimes I will voice them, sometimes I'll keep them to myself. But it really feels good to me to at least be part of something, even if I'm not all in, right? So that can be part of it. The polarity is the Leo house. And so this is identifying, accepting, and stepping fully into your own unique expression, right? So, how I just described the polarities there with the 11th house, the self empowerment journey with an 11th house Pluto is to be unique, is to tap into your own creative gifts, skills, and abilities and be able to express those authentically in whatever platform or whatever way you feel feels good for you, and understand that the people that will respond to you are the people that need to respond to you, right? It's an authentic energy exchange, and be okay with people not accepting you or you not fitting into consensus reality. That's okay too, right? Being okay with that, to know that you do carry a unique expression. And oftentimes you're going to come forward with things that many people may not agree with or may not be able to see your vision or may say that that's too advanced, that's not really reality. And so, can you be okay with that and be able to express that in a way that feels good for you? And then we arrive at Pluto in the 12th house, which this is mediumship, dissolving, and bridging. So, what the heck do I mean by that? So, a 12th house Pluto, think of the highest expression of this placement is like a channel or a medium or somebody that can readily be able to access information from other dimensions, right? Whether that be their higher self or people that have passed on, or ascended masters or guides, or people that have passed in other people's lives, right? They're able to feel collective energies, meaning they can walk into a room and they can just feel the undertone of what's going on in the room. So that kind of energy, but being able to feel all of that stuff while still being able to discern how to ground themselves in this reality, how to create proper boundaries so that they don't take on people's stuff and they can use this gift or skill in the appropriate way for themselves so they don't get lost, right? So this would be a 12th house Pluto. And so that's the one end of the spectrum. And of course, with Pluto, the need to experience the different extremes. So one of them can be disassociation or feeling overwhelmed, right? Which is there's too much going on. I'm feeling too much energy and maybe not even realizing that you do that, that you are picking up on other people's energies. And so you take it on as your own and it becomes overwhelming. And then you disassociate, which means this is too much. So I'm going to focus my energy over here and I'm not going to pay attention to what's going on around me, right? Or this could manifest as numbing yourself through substances, right? Can be a part of this, like drug use and things like that, where you escape into another reality, right? Or you are constantly in the higher realms where you're not really able to function in this society. The material stuff, like being able to hold down a job and being able to sustain yourself and being able to make money and being there for the people around you, right? That can be difficult for people with a 12th house Pluto. The other thing here is another soul imprinting of guilt, which is the same thing that was felt in the 10th house, can be that kind of feeling here in the 10th house, which means that you feel this obligation to other people, but and if you don't do it, then you feel this guilt, right? Can be what you experience in this lifetime, or just from other lifetimes of being a little bit weird or off, right? Like think of past timelines where you were a psychic or a medium and that wasn't accepted in society, right? And so for some, in some form or fashion, you were cast aside or you were injured in some way or reprimanded or punished in some way, cast out of society. And so there's this underwhelming, or there's this underlying feeling of guilt for being who you are, right? And so that might need to get worked through in this lifetime, can be a part of this. And so the polarity here is Virgo, which is the earth side, which is like, how do I be of service, right? Well, first is the awareness you have a 12th house Pluto. You do feel other people's energies. You are going to need to establish boundaries. You're going to need some time to yourself to remove yourself from people's energies. And then the other side, bringing the Virgo part into it is, well, not, now that I know I can feel energies and that could be part of my superpower here, how do I do this in service of others and do it in a way that feels authentic to me and be able to be good with the 3D reality, being able to hold a job, being able to make money, being able to support myself, being able to be grounded in this reality so that I can bridge between the non-physical and the physical, and I can do that well and become an example of that for others. And so that's where I go back to, like, the natural psychic or the medium could be an example of this, is somebody that's really good at doing this, helping other people to heal or experience their own past life stuff, or be able to help them navigate their current life circumstances and being able to do it in a way that supports them and is a good energy exchange, can be part of this. So really getting in touch with your intuition, being able to understand the energy that you're feeling and being of service to others. So that is Pluto through the houses. So as always, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you again in other videos. Thank you.